and he's not doing the job. They got to do it, and I'm gonna have to get the federal government involved in getting it fixed because he can't fix anything.
And that was President Trump last night verbally attacking Maryland Governor Wes Moore, saying Moore is in part to blame for the massive sewage spill in the Potomac River. And Governor Moore's office responded by saying the president has his facts wrong again, and it is the federal government that's responsible for the system at the origin of the sewage leak. So this is the latest exchange. It's one of many that we've seen between the two men since the president started his second term. And joining us now live is John Dedie, a professor and Maryland political analyst, to kind of examine these interactions. John, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
And first, what do you make of this latest threat of federal intervention into the sewage spill that we're hearing from the president?
This is the way President Trump rolls, with threats, hyperbole, etc. Something goes wrong in Maryland, let's figure out a way to blame the governor. If Trump had been president when the bridge collapsed, he would have blamed that on Wes Moore too. That's the modus operandi. That is the way the president rolls with a lot of stuff. And I think that Moore has handled this fairly well as far as basically clapping back at the president saying, hey, you got your facts wrong, buddy.
And, you know, to zero in on some of these criticisms, the actions that you bring up here, the president has slammed Governor Moore on a couple different occasions. On social media less than a week ago, he uninvited Moore to the National Governors Association dinner. Do you think there's a strategy to this frequent criticism of Governor Moore?
I don't know what the strategy is, because in many ways it only elevates Moore's profile nationally. You know, in the state of Maryland, Moore's popularity is only about 50%. But because Trump is creating conflict with Moore, in many ways he elevates him with progressives in 49 other states. And they see a guy being attacked by the president. They see a guy that has some, what people feel is Obama-esque qualities. And for Moore, this is probably a good thing to get in this tussle. And at the same time, I think Moore's done a smart thing. A few months ago in these tussles, Moore clapped back a lot. And I use an expression, don't poke the bear. And he started to tone down the rhetoric a little bit. And in that forum they had at CBS Sunday night, Moore listed all these things President Trump had said that you could view as racist. And instead of calling him a racist, he basically said, ask the president, you can make up your mind whether he is.
Yeah, you bring up the clapback. You know, Governor Moore has not stayed silent. Do you believe, though, that Governor Moore is handling Trump the right way, or possibly risking retribution to the state when it comes to, you know, at times when a state needs help from the federal government, needs funding, like for the reconstruction of the Key Bridge? Is this the right way to go about it?
I think you have to be very careful. I use the expression about not poking the bear. And I think you have to keep in mind, he could make things difficult with things like the Key Bridge funding. He could make it difficult with a variety of things. You know, what if he decides again, you know, we need to get rid of more federal workers and things like that. I think you have to be very careful in dealing with Trump in that aspect. And he likes people with strength. So I think Moore responding to him basically, instead of name calling, just fact calling him out. And that way it's like he could say at the end, hey, I got my facts wrong. You went on a tangent. Here's what's really going on. So I think that Moore has handled that a lot better than he had handled it probably 6-7 months ago.
And I do want to ask, we were even chatting, you and I, in the break. I said, you know, we've seen the president get into it on social media with other governors. What comes to mind for me is Governor Gavin Newsom of California. We've seen them use names at each other, you know, no profanity here, but calling each other. I think President Trump just called Governor Newsom a loser. Newsom loves to troll the president. Are these just political statements? Is there a real relationship here? And for some, and maybe this is even just an opinion question for you, does this lack some dignity in an era where people are yearning for that again in politics?
Those are really good questions. I'll kind of answer this in a few little parts. Newsom is doing this because it elevates his profile among progressives. I've said this for months. In many ways, Moore has been copying some of the Newsom things, such as in redistricting. In other words, Newsom does it. The progressives think it's the most wonderful thing in the world. So the governor says, hey, now we got to redistrict and go from 7 to 1 to 8 to 0. And when you think about the civility. There are governors that are not having conflicts. And Governor Whitmer of Michigan, Governor Beshear of Kentucky, they've avoided that type of stuff, still making criticisms in a way, but not trying to instigate things. They've done what I like to call it in the workplace sometimes, fly below radar when you have a crazy boss. And I think that people are going to look for a civility, and they may look for it in governors as far as presidential candidates. They're going to look for someone who basically, in many ways, will be younger and will promise to bring back the adults in the room and get rid of some of the crazy behavior. And I think that's what people are going to look for. And I think the fact that you have someone like Beshear, who's a governor of a deep red state and has gotten elected twice, people are going to wonder what's the secret sauce behind that. And Whitmer, who's managed to have a good relationship with him. I think for progressives and the far left activists, what Moore and Newsom are doing, it gets them all fired up. But it's like this: at a high school pep rally, the person who does the most yelling and screaming is the C student. You don't want them being class president.
So we're looking long term. There's a lot more to some of these digital internet back and forth clashes than just what's happening before our eyes now. John Dedie, Maryland political analyst and professor. John, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights.
You're welcome.
All right, take care. And